I'd like to acknowledge Australia's First Nation people as the traditional custodians of the land, and for this episode in particular, the Wiradjuri people. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging.
So I moved to the Clare Valleys with the idea that I might retire. I really had a hankering to play golf. I'd learnt to play bridge on a kibbutz in Israel, and I thought, gee, I'd really love to take that up. Fascinating game, good for the brain, and I haven't done either.
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale. Stephanie Toole has been making wine in the Clare Valley of South Australia since the early 90s. Always insisting on quality first and uncompromising in leaving the land better than she found it. She forms an integral part of the Clare Valley story. Hi, Stephanie. Thanks for joining me.
Good afternoon. How's everything?
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for making some time for me today. How are you and where are you situated today?
So I'm in the absolutely beautiful Clare Valley, in the small village of Auburn, which is right at the beginning of the Clare Valley. And it's a bit of a wintry day, but not enough rain. We could do with some of your rain, so just send it on down. We're a bit late in the season getting the rainfall, so any time now would be good. And looking forward to our chat.
Oh, it's lovely to hear. I hear from a few people that have said send on the rain, and it's so unfair that we just, we cop it all and we can't do that for you. We can't just say, I keep saying to my partner, surely we can create an underwater ground system that can, funnel it where it needs to. And, I'm sure it's very easy to do, and that's why they haven't done it yet.
Yes, exactly.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about your journey in wine. Where did the journey of wine begin for you in terms of what was your first memory of wine?
Oh, first memory. Do you know, I actually do remember the very first glass of wine I had, and it's showing my age somewhat, although I do believe that this wine has a huge sales, and that's the good old Matousse Rosé.
Ah, well, yeah.
And I think I was old enough to drink. I know it was in a restaurant and it was ever so posh, and the little slight sparkle and the very slight pink, and felt very grown up. But that wasn't really my journey. So I didn't really get into wine until much later, and I was living in London and became involved in tastings for a well-known bottle shop over there in Brompton Road. And so when I moved to Australia in 1986, I really had no knowledge of Australian wine. So, I had a good grounding in European wines, but to be honest, I didn't even know where the Barossa Valley was. Now, that might sound strange, but I was actually born in New Zealand, so I was sort of very green as to where the various wine producing areas were. Of course, I'd been to Margaret River a couple of times because I moved to Perth and had been in Perth previous to the move. I knew exactly where Margaret River was, but I was a little bit hazy on the old South Australian wine regions. So in Perth, I was actually a PA, and because I had no knowledge of Australian wines, I thought it was about time I got myself educated. So I enrolled in a TAFE course, and that then led to a more advanced wine course, and the more advanced wine course owner actually offered me a job. And I said, well, no, I'm okay, thanks. I'm quite happy where I am. And he said, no, I think you would be it was a sort of a fine wine store. No, I'd really want your skills, your background and organisational skills and also your palate. So he wore me down, and I went to work in retail to start off with. And that then led to wholesaling, and I worked in wholesale for a few years and then started my own wholesale business before moving to the Clare Valley a few years later. So I've been here nearly 30 years. Wow. In fact, this is the longest I've lived anywhere in the world.
Well, must be because you love it, no doubt. But who was that person that wanted you to get involved in in retail and wanted to give you that wine job? Because I feel like we have to say a little thank you.
Yeah, so his name was Kevin Lukey, and he probably recognised that I did have a passion for wine and a reasonably good palate. And he gave me my first introduction in retail, and then I got poached by a very well-known wine identity in Perth called John Jens, and I worked for him for quite a few years as well. Well, a couple of years. It seemed to move, things moved quite quickly in a way.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting that you kind of got involved in retail, then wholesale, then into winemaking. That's really interesting. I mean, you had a great knowledge base of kind of how the logistics of things work, didn't you?
I did actually, yes, but no actual practical experience at all. So I moved to the Clare Valleys with the idea that I might retire. I really had a hankering to play golf, and I had played bridge in my travels around the world in previous years. I'd learnt to play bridge on a kibbutz in Israel, and I thought, gee, I'd really love to take that up. Fascinating game, good for the brain, and I haven't done either.
Oh, no, I was about to say, because the idea of golf and bridge actually sounds quite idyllic, you know.
That's what I thought. Exactly.
So you purchased Mount Horrocks in 1993, I believe. Why did you enter into buying a wine estate? Why not just go and work for somebody else and get the experience that way?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Well, I was actually pregnant, so I moved to the Clare Valley to be with my current partner, Jeff, and he owns Horrocks Wines. And so my first vintage was 93, and I was 12 weeks pregnant, and I just sort of, worked through the whole thing. And this Mount Horrocks came up for sale, and I remember saying to Jeff, well, look, that'd give me something to do. So obviously had no idea how much time babies, children, motherhood took up. And so had Georgina that year, and then Alexander 15 months later. So it was a busy time, new business, whole new career, and 2 little babies, really.
Oh, he did it the easy way. Just smoothly glided into it.
I just figured if I had them together, I could get lots of things done together, like potty training, all of that. And that worked out quite well.
I think it maybe says something about the way you look at things, because I don't think that you've always gone the easy route in life, and certainly in terms of your winemaking, I don't think you have. So maybe that says something about you.
Yeah, perhaps.
I want to talk a bit about the Clare Valley. Winemaking stretches back in the Clare over 160 years, and the region's been so important as part of our Australian history. Can you touch a little bit about the importance of the Clare and maybe how you've seen it develop over the years and why it's important in our Australian identity?
Absolutely. It's a really small wine producing region for a start off. I think at the moment it accounts for about 1.5% of the Australian production. So that gives you an idea. It's small in production, but it's also smaller in area. So about 26 kilometres long and about 8 kilometres wide, and a main road going sort of up the middle, and vineyards either side of the road, and little valleys and little sub-regions going off that main road. It's like a plateau more than anything, because as you come into the Clare Valley from the sides, say, you actually drive up. You drive up rather than down, and so the elevation is, my vineyard particularly, is quite high. It's 480 metres. But I guess we're well known, obviously, for Riesling and also Reds. We actually grow in the region more Reds than Riesling. But our climate is quite, it's suited for both varieties, which I think is quite unusual from a European point of view. We have long sunny days. So with Margaret River, we have the most sunshine hours of any premium wine producing region in Australia. And with those long sunny days, we have very clear and cold nights. So that means that the acid retention, we can retain acid. And we're only about an hour away from the sea. We're not maritime, we're continental, but we do get an influence from that sea, from a sea breeze. So I would say we actually probably are more well known than what most people think when relating it to size. And we are mainly, we don't have a lot of the great big wine companies. They're smaller, most often family owned, with some of them now coming into their second and third generations. So, yeah.
You're right. I think that the reputation of the Clare for relative visit size is says so much about the quality of wine coming out of there. But the production, of Shiraz and Riesling really helped, I think, put a spotlight of Australia on an international map. And those two varietals are still so important today. I want to talk about two varieties that you make exceptionally well. Riesling, of course, we cannot go past it. I want to talk a bit about your Cordon Cut, but also a little bit about your Nero d'Avola as well. I think these are two great examples of different approaches that you have. So walk us through how you approach Riesling on your sites.
Okay, well, I think it's really important first to say that I only make wine from my own vineyards, which is in Watervale. So they're estate grown, single vineyard, small batch. And I'm certified organic and biodynamic. And I think that's really important for me, and from getting a perspective on the quality aspect. So Riesling is everything is hand done, hand picked. All the vines are hand pruned. I make a small quantity, as I said. I'm about 2,500 cases, depending on the year. So I'm a 0.000% of the wine industry, and the Riesling is actually quite beautiful. It's a very special little site, little vineyard, faces south, which when I planted it 20 years ago was probably considered not ideal. And I find in today's climate and with our climate change and the way I manage the vineyards that it's actually perfect. Get some late afternoon protection. And the fruit that comes in is quite in very good condition. We don't have an issue with disease threat. We have quite dry, mild weather. As I said, it can get hot in the summer, but then the nights cool very quickly, which is ideal for Riesling. So the Nero d'Avola that was love at first sight. I tasted it in Rome in 2003. It was a really, really hot year in Europe, 2003, and we stopped at a wine bar to have some lunch and got given this enormous Bible-size wine list, and I sort of looked at the guy and said, look, I've really, not a lot of these wines, I do know some of them, we get them in Australia, but perhaps you could choose something that I might not have had. And he came back with an incredibly reasonably priced Nero d'Avola from Sicily, and that was love at first sight. So back to Australia and hunted down where I could get the cuttings to plant. It did take quite a few years. They were only just being introduced into Australia, and you have to go through quarantine and then into the nursery to be propagated. So I didn't get them actually in the ground until 2008. And then my first vintage the first wine into bottle was in 2012, and it's just an absolute joy to make. It's a delicious, easy drinking, medium bodied. If it's a really hot day, you can chuck it in the fridge for half an hour. But what really struck me when I tasted it that first time in Rome was how I thought it would really suit our way of life and our the food, the weather, something a little bit less, not as heavy, not as much oak, and just enjoy with food. So that was the Nero.
Makes so much sense to me, and it grows particularly well in those slightly warmer climates, and like you said, the alcohol levels aren't through the roof. So I think it's really fascinating because you are someone who's made some really classic, beautiful varieties, and that you're really at the forefront of thinking about what might be next. And I mean, you were one of the first to actually plant Nero in Australia, I think. Is that right?
Yes, I was. Yeah, and definitely in the Clare Valley. There've been quite a few. There's probably 3 or 4 producers since that have planted Nero up here. It's low yield. Well, I keep it low yielding, and it's a naturally high acid variety, so it needs no adjustment, and it's just an absolute joy to make. It's just bright and juicy and delicious. It's a great wine.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. And I think, like you said, it suits a lot of different food types. It's a great wine that you could have with lunch. You're not going to, need to have a 4-hour nap after. So it makes a lot of sense. You've taken into account a lot of our Australianisms to think about that far ahead and think about Nero d'Avola in that place. I love it. I also want to talk about your cane cuts. We briefly touched on things not being particularly easy or making life easy for yourself. Your cordon cut is, iconic in Australia. It is a wine that I remember first seeing in my first ever job in retail. It's a wine I've seen on nearly every great wine list I've ever seen. And it's a particularly risky way of treating sweet wine. Can you walk us a little bit through that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. And can I just say that tears have been shed over this wine? It's, look, it sounds simple. We cut the canes and we leave the fruit to hang and raisin naturally in the vineyard. Well, that's all terrific, so long as the weather behaves itself. And I must admit, in most years, that's definitely not a problem. This year's been absolutely sensational. But because we don't have disease, so botrytis is almost unknown in the Clare Valley, this is one way that I can make a dessert wine regularly every year with some consistency without having to worry about whether I'm going to get botrytis or not. So the canes are cut. So the vineyard is cane pruned, so it's pruned differently. And the canes are cut and the fruit is left, as I said, to hang and raisin. So not all the canes, just 50%, because you've got to have the arms to wrap down for next year. And as soon as, and with this wine, I never sample. So with the other varieties, I'm in the vineyard and I'm taking berry samples and they go back into the lab and we test it for acid and BOME and pH. With the cordon cut, I pick entirely on taste and sight and a feel that it's ready. So I'm in the vineyard checking it regularly, and then when I think it looks right and it tastes right, I pick it. It's such a clean, fresh and delicious dessert wine. In some years, like the last couple of years, have been quite high residual sugar. Surprisingly, most people don't come anywhere near guessing the amount of residual sugar, but the balance of the fruit, the residual sugar and the acid is there, so it's quite deceiving. And as I said, it's quite fresh and clean. It doesn't have that cloying sort of sickly aftertaste. It's really delicious.
And it ages so well.
It does, yeah. It does age very well. And, in 2005 or 6, I can't remember which year, it was served at Queen Elizabeth's 80th birthday in London. And that was really, that was great because there were only 4 wines served at that luncheon, at her official luncheon, and the cordon cut was the only Australian wine. So I was quite chuffed about that.
Yeah, what an honour. I feel like you should have got an invite to that lunch, if you were providing the wine. Maybe they
Definitely
can go in the suggestion box for next time. I mean, you touched on the fact that you're certified organic and biodynamic. I mean, that process doesn't happen overnight. When did you decided to go on that venture? And I'm sure that now it's all done with. It's something you're really proud of, but it must have been a bit of a process to get underway.
Well, when I planted the vineyard in 2000 and 2001, I knew then that I wanted to manage the vineyard as organically as I could. The use of herbicides and pesticides, and in particular Roundup, just didn't make sense to me in this climate that we enjoy. So the vineyard was managed organically to start with, and then I realised that, you know, to do something, you've really got to do it properly. There's no half measures. You know, you're either pregnant or you're not pregnant. You're either certified or you're not certified. And I just felt then that was the way to go, and I've been certified for over 10 years now. There is a process you go through. So you become organic in conversion, and then you get your certification, and you know they Australian Certified Organics monitor it yearly. We have audits. It makes you authentic. It makes you accountable. It's all very well saying, "Oh, I use organic practices where I can," and that's fine. But I just think the certification is that one step up on that. And from the organics, my interest, you know, of course, you sort of progress, you're learning, and my interest turned to biodynamics. So I'm in my 4th year of biodynamics, and already I feel like I can see a definite improvement in the soil and the vine health. And as well as using that in my vineyard practices, for the last 15 years, I've been planting around 1,000 trees every year, and I've got quite a large area that's not under vine, and I feel like that's all part of the biodiversity as well, introducing insects, bird life, animals, and just all part of that ecosystem. It's not just one thing. It's not just about spraying biodynamic 501. There's more to it than that. So, yeah, it's about giving back and making the land a better place than when I got it. So it was a piece of grazing land, hadn't been planted to vines before, and I already. The farmer I bought it off, he said to me last year, he said, it's absolute credit. He said, I can't believe how you've turned this around. So that was nice.
Amazing. I mean, yeah, no easy feat, and such a credit to you to be doing that. And I know that, you know, whatever happens in the future, that piece of dirt is in incredibly good hands. I want to talk a little bit, just very briefly, about the major challenges of the Clare Valley. I think most of the most redeeming features of the Clare are that it's quite regional, it's a boutique production, but it also is in isolation. And so there must be challenges that come with that. What is the hardest part of working in the Clare? And then also, why do you think it's a wonderful wine region to work from?
The challenges, look, I don't see a lot of challenges here. I think probably we're seen as being a bit far away from Adelaide. And now you would laugh at that because we're an hour and 20 minutes. I mean, people commute in Sydney, that sort of distance almost every day. That understanding that we're actually more accessible than people think. During these COVID times, we've had a lot of people visit saying, well, this is the first time I've ever been to the Clare Valley. And they live in Adelaide, I don't mean interstate people either. So we need to get out, you know, it's all very well being a best kept secret, but I would prefer that we got more visitors. I think that's important. We're doing wonderful things. I think the wines here are are truly world class.
A lot of people say, oh, Clare Valley, it's out on its own. And I think, well, yeah, but like, what's an hour's drive? 1 hour and 20 minutes? What's that? Like, it seems to be talked about like it's on the other side of the world sometimes. And
exactly.
I just think, well, God, Australia's a big place, you know, like next door is sometimes an hour away. It's kind of crazy.
That's true. And I mean, the Barossa Valley's only an hour from here. So it's quite doable to get around the wine regions in South Australia quite easily. But also when you're in the Clare Valley, it doesn't take very long to get from one point to another, you know, from Auburn to Watervale to Seven Hill to Clare. I mean, it's a 20-minute drive from Auburn to Clare. It's very, very close, and it's very easy, and the wineries are very close, and, you know, some of them are just 5 minutes, some of them 2 minutes beside each other. So it's a very doable place to visit.
Absolutely. And it's just, I haven't been out there, so, you know, wrap me on the knuckles. But I've been dying to get out there. I think that, you know, some of the Shiraz that I've tasted from the Clare taste unlike anywhere else in Australia. And particularly Riesling. We've seen such a wonderful journey of Riesling, and so much of that is thanks to you and your husband. I actually want to share this story with you, which you probably remember. I've served you a few times, you and your husband, and I'll never forget the first time. I was a younger som, and I didn't know who I was serving, and it wasn't until my kind of mentor pointed out, that's Stephanie Toole and Jeffrey Grosset, and I was like, great, who are they? And then she told me, and I thought, I wish you hadn't told me until they left, because now I was so incredibly nervous. But we had a lovely time, and I'm sure you had a lovely lunch, hopefully. But I remember the second time, it was funny. You came in, and I was briefing the team, and some of the younger soms said to me, and who are they? And I was like, they are the king and queen of Australian Riesling. And if you don't know who they are, that is your homework. You come back and tell me. And I thought that was kind of cruel, because my mentor was much nicer than me when I asked that question. But I remember thinking, oh my gosh, what if they asked me about Riesling and my opinion on what to drink? And I kind of had a moment where I was like, holy God, what am I going to say?
Oh no, I hope we're not intimidated.
Not at all. The absolute opposite of that. I had such a great old time, and you know, I definitely made the most of it, and I tried to ask you a few questions to learn a few things, seemingly appropriate questions, but it was lovely. But I just remember thinking, you know, that's a really funny little moment of the first time I met you and the second time, and you're just absolute delights to have in a restaurant. So any som would be so lucky.
Thank you.
I ask everybody that's on the podcast, if you could only drink 3 boozy beverages for the rest of your life, Stephanie, what would they be and why?
Oh, I have to say champagne. I'm a bit of a lush. Probably Riesling. It's going to be all wine. I'm not, you know, I drink the occasional gin and tonic and the occasional beer if it's a really, really hot day and I'm really, really thirsty. And I quite like single malt, but I would have to say champagne. I would have to say Riesling. And then I don't know, it'd be toss up between Cabernet and Shiraz. Just thinking about what's in my cellar, although I do drink a reasonable amount of Pinot as well. But both, that's more than 3, isn't it?
No, I know. But once you get on a roll, it's hard, isn't it? It's like, you know, picking a TV show. It depends on what's happening around you, right? And what you feel like.
Look, absolutely. It depends on what's around you and what you feel like and what sort of day you've had.
So many factors.
Oh, definitely.
Well, they are definitely some prestigious varieties that you've given us there. Champagne, Riesling and Cabernet or Shiraz. So I definitely don't think you could go wrong with any of those. Stephanie, it's been such a pleasure having you on the podcast. I hope the next time we speak, I really hope that it's probably at your beautiful cellar door in the old Auburn train station or in your vineyards.
You're more than welcome. Let us know when you're going to make the trek.
Oh, I really will do, because I'd love to see some of your beautiful sites that I've heard so much about. And I hope the next time we speak, you have a little bit more golf and bridge in your life as well.
I doubt it. I feel like I'm so excited about the work being done in the vineyard that I'm probably working harder than I ever have. But that's all right. That's fine. Better than being bored.
And you do it so well. But don't forget to have a little bit of rest too. And thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Shanteh.
Such a pleasure. Cheers to you. This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale. Stay tuned for more stories from the world of wine and drinks. Listen in every Thursday on your podcast app. Follow us on Instagram at overaglasspod and contact us at overaglass@deepintheweeds.com.au.